Hi, I'm Suki. Welcome to Getting Psychic, where you can listen to me use myself to test the theory that anyone can get psychic. Hello and welcome to Getting Psychic. I'm here with Shelby McGhee. Shelby is certified in inner voice facilitation and quantum hypnosis. She also practices a modality called emotional alchemy, which intentionally transmutes dense, trapped emotions to initiate change for her clients. Welcome, Shelby.
Hi,
Thanks for being here.
thanks for having me. I'm so excited to be on.
Yeah, so I'm really looking forward to learning all about the modalities that you practiced and what it's like when you combine them in a session. But let's start at the beginning. How did this become your life?
Well, I've always been a very emotional person. Since the time I was really young, I was always said to be the sensitive one. I was the one that would cry for no reason at all. And as I
Are you
continue,
crying right now?
well, my eyes already like they just like go, just like like okay, like emotion, come forward.
Oh my God.
And I've spent a lot of time like allowing my body to be comfortable with crying because when I was young it was always like, oh, you're so sensitive, and then so I would shut it all down. And then
Mhm.
as I got older and I learned like how important it is to feel our emotions and to process our emotions, one of the big things that I had to kind of overcome was talking to someone and then just starting to cry and not shutting that down because it really like opens your heart and it opens their heart also, and it creates like a bond and a connection for people to express. So I've become a very safe place for other people to express because I'm constantly allowing myself to express my emotions as much as I need to, which in turn like mirrors that back to someone and allows them to like really open up.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So, what was your life before? Were you someone who grew up with psychic intuitive healing skills, or did you develop them over time? What was the process that landed you on this podcast?
Well, I would say that I've always had them, but I never recognized what they looked like until I got older and started like releasing the feelings and the thoughts that I wasn't psychic, that I didn't have these abilities already. And so it's really cool because as I've continued to learn and grow, it's like, I would say like my strongest clair is like claircognizance. So I have like that knowing and then clair sentience. So the feeling, the emotion. And so, of course, everybody wants to be clairvoyant. And so you're like, oh, dang, I wish I could see things. But it would it would be like, well, maybe I'm not supposed to do that. Maybe I'm not meant to do that. And now I've learned, and actually with the emotional alchemy helping me quite a bit, is that it's all already there. And it's like releasing the blocks that are keeping you from being aware of where your emotions are and then aware of your clairvoyance is like the key to developing those. So for me, it was like I knew had claircognizance. So, like, say for instance, I was in a session with someone and I would get that knowing, like, Kuan Yin is here. And then instead of like seeing her physically, what I would do is I would just know she was there. And then the emotion, so my clairsentience would kick in, and the emotion of her like would come forward. She's very kind and very caring and very loving and very open-hearted. And so that would open and that would confirm that that's who I was feeling, right? And so I always thought like, oh, I wish I could just see her. But the more that I leaned into the knowing and then I leaned into my second most strong ability of the like feeling, then my clairvoyance would fill in the rest. And so I guess it's kind of like if your strongest clair is, say, you see someone and they're speaking and you can't quite hear them. So let's say like the clairvoyance is like the hearing, and you can't quite hear them. You like look at them and you watch their mouth move. And as you watch their mouth move, then your mind fills in what they're saying, right? So it's like the same concept of like, even though I'm not physically seeing her at first, I'm leaning into like the abilities that I already have. And in doing that, it fills in the rest. And so that's something that I leaned into as I was getting older of like, okay, well, if my strongest ability is the knowing and is the feeling, if I continue to lean into those abilities, then the rest really opened up and it's continued to open up. But it's taken a lot of years for me to start to have that like clairvoyance and like the seeing.
Yeah.
But it all comes back down to clearing the blocks that are covering those abilities. And so as I've leaned into like the emotional alchemy and teaching other people how to do it and how to release their emotions, the more that my abilities have opened up.
Okay, cool. So let's talk about, I want to talk about all three of the modalities separately, but so what will you describe what an emotion is on an energetic level? Like,
Yeah,
what's an emotion?
sure. So the easiest way that I like to look at it, and the easiest way because of the way it sounds, is like an emotion is energy in motion, right? So if something happens that creates energy within your body, and then you feel it fully, it's an emotion. So it moves through the body and out of the body. But when something happens, like say for instance something happens that make you angry and you like shut down that emotion, then it gets trapped, it gets dense, it gets stuck in the emotional body. So an emotion is energy that comes forward that your body processes with an emotion and then allows through. But if you're unable to process that emotion or feel that emotion fully, then it just kind of like stays in your emotional body and then re-triggers over and over and over as you live life.
So, what are some of the symptoms of quote unquote trapped emotion?
It's everybody has them at some point in their life and they all hold them at some point in their life. It just depends on what it is. So there's some people that like say at a young age they were taught not to feel anger, and maybe they grew up and they saw the way that their parents showed anger, and so they chose not to do that, or someone told them not to do that, and so then they started like holding it in. Well, anger can manifest like someone who like blows up and like hits things or hits people, or um it can even manifest into diseases or illnesses or like arthritis in certain parts of the body. um your body will take that energy and do something with it. So really depends on the person, what emotion it is and where they're holding it, on how it manifests, but you can see it in all different ways.
Yeah, and we all have them. Like, I feel
Yeah.
like it's impossible to not have it, right?
Yeah, and it's like there's nothing wrong with having them. It's just that we haven't learned how to express them and allow them to move through. And it makes your life just so much more pleasant because you're not holding on to that dense emotion.
Yeah. Okay, I was weirdly like reading last night. So I'm reading this book called, or what I was meant to say was like weirdly last night I was reading about something that I feel like pertains a lot to what you're saying. So I
Hmm.
was reading this book called Electric Body, Electric Health, about my new obsession, which is biofield tuning, by Eileen Day McCusick. And yesterday I read this quote by Eckhart Tolle in her book. So she says, in his book, A New Earth, Tolle describes the pain body as the remnants of pain left behind by every strong negative emotion that is not fully faced, accepted, and then let go of. They join together to form an energy field that lives in the very cells of your body. What he calls the pain body consists of all suffering and struggle you've been through and the imprint that is left on the way that you see yourself and approach your life. So she goes on to describe that these energies sort of can spill out into your aura, which is the energy that radiates about 6 feet around you, and how they have a palpable vibration, sound, or texture. So I was wondering, in your work, How do you see the energy of unprocessed emotions, and what are some of the things you've seen them do in a person's life?
Yeah, well, I mean, it's beautiful that you quoted Eckhart Tolle because I would say that these emotional blockages in the body, those are the pain body, right? So that's something that I've learned. You could read The Power of Now over and over and over and not quite understand what it is that he's trying to get to. And then all of a sudden, boom, you're like, oh, that's what that is he's talking about.
Yeah.
And that's what I call like emotional bean bags or like dense trapped emotion that's ready to be alchemized. And so the way that I see it is like if someone is expressing to me for some reason, like I guess because my one of my strongest clairs is like the claircognizant, but then also the clairsentience. Like I get that same emotion within me that they're feeling, and so that like cues me that something's going on with them in their emotional body. And then as I lean into like where that is, that I'm feeling it, then it'll kind of like light up for me, so I can explain it back to them. But for just a normal everyday person, like if they see something that it's like a trigger, like it's one of those things that it creates like heaviness, it creates density. So for instance, someone who gets road rage and it's like someone cut them off on the freeway and there's no reason for them to be like so angry, but they are, and they can't explain why. It's something that happens within your body and your experience that if someone else didn't hold that emotional beanbag or didn't hold that emotion stuck in their body, it wouldn't upset them. And so, for instance, road rage, like someone like me, I don't have road rage. But if you cut my sister off, she's gonna like freak out and yell at you out the window, right? And so it's one of those things that you can be aware of it if it feels like you're the only one that feels that way, or you're the only one because it feels personal to you, and that like someone is doing something intentionally personal to you. And for instance, someone else may not have that like trigger or that heavy emotion. And so the way that you recognize it is when certain things happen in your life that you like either shut down, or it really like enrages you, or it makes you super sad, and you're like like why am I feeling this way, kind of, and it's like, does everybody feel this way about this thing? And we all have them, but they're all in different places. So everybody's emotional beanbags or their emotional blockages are different, but we all have them.
Yeah. Okay, I like how you use physical objects, and I'm aware of the fact that you also call upon your clients to describe
Mhm.
their emotions using physical objects. Can you walk us through that? Like, what does it look like when someone has an emotional alchemy session with you?
Yeah, so basically what how we start is we always start in the heart. We always start in the center, in the intuition. What I have them do is I have them take a few breaths, and I really like to use the breath as the biggest tool, because when you're like, there's a difference between being in your body and being in your mind, right? Your mind has like all these stories that it wants to say about the situation, and it has like all these ways of protecting you so that you don't have to feel the way that you want to feel. But I like to start them by going into the body, because then the mind isn't like in control. And so I use the breath, and going into the breath and continuing to use the breath is a way of kind of moving past the mind. Because if the mind holds on to a thought, it holds its breath, right? So like when someone asks you a question and you breathe in and you think about it and then you talk, right? But if you constantly walk someone through and continuing to breathe while they're answering the questions, while they're moving through things, that's when they start talking from their intuition. That's when they start going into their body and they start speaking from their intuition and not their mind. So when the mind holds on to a thought, it holds its breath. So the first thing I do is I help someone breathe into the body, move into the heart or the stomach, the place where they've heard that intuition before in their body. And then we go into like that feeling of love. And then after we find that really peaceful, loving space that like resides most of the time in the heart space, then we kind of like expand the awareness. And as we expand the awareness outward, we look for any density, anything that doesn't feel light, doesn't feel like love, doesn't, if it feels like anger, if it feels like sadness, whatever it is that it feels like, I just kind of ask them, like, okay, what are you sensing in your body that doesn't feel like that lightness, that love, that heart space? And as they move through, it may be like, you know, a feeling in my stomach that feels like fear. And the reason why I have them give it a shape and I also have them give it a size is because it does give the mind something to do. So the awareness is what actually transmutes and alchemizes that emotion. The mind wants to be the one that does it, but it's not, and it could never be. But it also wants to be involved because it wants to help you, right? Your ego is here to like protect you. But in this situation, like we don't need protection. We need to be able to process this emotion. So the mind's going to do whatever it needs to do, like create the story over and over and over in the head, instead of actually going into that space and creating that awareness, feeling it fully, and letting it release and alchemize. So we give the mind a job, we allow it to help. And that's the way that it feels like it's a part of the process. So, what does the mind do? It gives it a shape, it gives it a size, it tells me where it is. So, for instance, it's in my stomach and it feels like a bowling ball. And then I ask them, well, what is inside the bowling ball? Like, what frequency is it? And it feels like fear. So, then we just take all of our awareness and bring it into the bowling ball in the stomach full of fear. And we use our breath, we use crying, I use shaking. I allow them to move their body however they need to do it to move to process. So like when we're a kid, when a kid throws a fit, they use their whole body, right? It's not until someone tells them not to do that and that that's inappropriate that they stop doing it. And then that's what creates the block, right? So the mind gives it a shape, gives it a size, and we use the breath to keep the awareness there and then just breathe through it. So instead of pushing that feeling of sadness away, we go into the feeling of sadness and we allow that feeling of sadness to be there and we welcome it on and we allow it to be there fully because as we continue to move into the emotion, it starts to dissipate, it starts to disappear. And then I check back in after like a minute or two, depending on how long or how deep or how big it is, and then I ask the mind again, okay, give it a shape, give it a size. What size is it now? A lot of times it's already like the size of a grape, And so then I just like guide them into, okay, well, where is that grape? Keep going into it, allow that emotion to come forward so that it can be released. And then we just go through it and give it a shot, shape and a size, give it a shape and a size as many times as it needs to until it's time to just be done, and your intuition will start to lead you into like, okay, it's done or it's no longer there. And so we're just keeping our awareness there for as long as it takes to move completely through that emotion. And it's kind of crazy because you would think like thinking about the emotion, bringing the emotion up, like and actually moving further into it is counterintuitive. But when you actually give your body the space to just feel the thing it needs to feel, it doesn't actually even take that long. I've gotten to a place after doing it multiple times for years now that I can just like catch it, be aware of it, and then breathe through it a few breaths, and then it's just gone. And it's really crazy because I remember the first time I did it for my husband. He had super bad anxiety and he would like go into major panic attacks. At one point, we had to take him to the hospital because his hands cramped up and clammed up. So his body like reacted so much because of the panic that it was doing anything it could to try to avoid it, right? So he got what's called tetany, and it was like once we found out that it was just this panic, right, that was happening. So one day he was kind of going through that panic, and what I did is I just walked him through some emotional alchemy and I showed him, and it was really scary at first, and I was like, it's okay, like go further into it, give it a shape, give it a size, like move, allow it to move through the body. We breathed through it together, and then at one point he said he felt like the energy like almost like electricity like shoot out of his hands. And then after that, he was like searching in his mind for that feeling of panic and he couldn't even find it. And it's like your mind is so used to the feeling that it's like goes searching for the thing. And then he couldn't find the feeling. And so it's really interesting because you could be so mad about something and then just choose to feel that anger, do what you need to do, move it through the body, stomp the feet, breathe, breathe, breathe. And then you go back to thinking about it and you're just not angry anymore. And then
Yeah.
you get that connection.
Yeah, that's beautiful. I mean, I also think that it's it's very poignant because all of the structures that surround us, I think, really tell us to not feel into things. Like, oh, you're super anxious? Let's get rid of that.
Hmm.
Let's shake it off. Shake it off. You're in pain? Like, okay, just
Right.
like pack that down.
Yeah.
I mean, it starts from day 1.
Right. And I mean, that's just suppressing it. That's just like creating other issues. It's going to show up, it's going to express itself in a different way. It's just, wouldn't you rather just express it emotionally and then let it go instead of holding on to it over and over and over until it just like blows up? That's why it's like I love using anger because anger is such a it's a higher frequency than sadness. It's a higher frequency than fear, but it's still not a emotion that we want to point at other people, right? So, but anger is a higher frequency, so it gets built up. And then, for instance, it gets built up in the hands. And so eventually someone is gonna, like if they can't feel their emotion, they're gonna feel it. It's just gonna be physically towards someone or something. And it's it's one of those things that if everybody could just learn how to actually feel their emotions, then we wouldn't have a lot of the things going on in this world that we do have. Because I feel really sad because something happened to me, and then instead of feeling sad, I'm going to move up the emotional scale to anger. And instead of feeling sad about what happened to me, I'm going to go straight into anger, and then I'm going to point it at someone and I'm going to say, well, this is your fault that this happened to me. And so if we can stop bypassing the sadness and allow the sadness to be there, then we wouldn't move to anger and then blame someone else for something that's going on in this world. It would just be, okay, let me actually sit with this sadness of what's happening. And in doing that, in alchemizing that emotion, and I don't want to say ridding the body of it, but allowing it to move through the body, then it like takes all this density out of the emotional body, which then in turn creates a clear passage to that higher self, to the guides, to God, to whichever word resonates to you. And it's like, if we can all move in and choose to express what's within ourselves and then create a clear passage to our higher self, to our inner voice, to our guides, to God, then we don't have to go looking for the answers because it's already there.
Yeah. So when you do a session with someone and they clear that bowling ball,
Hmm.
is that something? I have a few questions about it. Like,
Yeah.
one, is that an emotion that they even have to know the origin of, or does the origin of it sometimes surface when you're doing the work?
Both, yes and no. Y- You want the emotion to be felt, and the mind is what wants to start bringing up the story, right? And
Yes.
sometimes you do need something to allow the emotion to come forward. And so there is a space for that if that's what's going to help you to feel the emotion. But if it's not helping to feel the emotion, it's just going through the story of what it is, then it really doesn't matter. And sometimes, even going into the emotion without knowing where the origin is, at the end of it, you get a glimpse of like, oh, this is when I pick that up. Oh, this is where this is from. But it's no longer like triggering anymore of the body. And your nervous system isn't going to be affected by it anymore.
Okay, so once you address a big fat one,
Hmm.
is is it gone?
Again, yes and no, because you'll never have it in the same space and the same intensity as when it came forward. And so it's so funny because I got the example of like the Horcruxes in Harry Potter and how like Voldemort, like everybody has that one emotion that's like the Voldemort, right? The one that's really scary. It could be from a childhood trauma, it could be something like very deep within the emotional body. And what happens is your higher self, your intuition and your guides are only going to bring forward as much as is safe and ready for you to process at one time, right? So when that Voldemort was created, there wasn't the space, the availability, and the safety to feel it fully, right? So that's why the body took it on and kept it and said, we're going to deal with this later because we don't have that right now. We don't have the capacity, we don't have the ability or the safety to move into this right now. And so we're going to just hold on to that and save it for later. And so as we get into spaces where we are safe to feel our emotions, then all of a sudden these start coming forward, right? And so what I like to say about like that big Voldemort one is that like you may go through and you might find one that feels like a sadness, a bowling ball in your stomach, and you may go into that and feel it fully and allow it to dissipate, and that one right there will be gone. It's not to say you're never going to feel sadness again, but that one is gone. And then another one might show up, and it might be in your shoulder. And it might be this like pain that's been in your shoulder for your whole life, and you can never figure out why, right? And then you move into that one and you create this space. And as this space is created in your life to feel it, then it comes forward. Then you get to move through it. And there may be like 4, 5, or 12 that are all connected, like the Horcruxes, to one emotion. But as you continue to move through each one, it gets easier and easier and easier until it's in a space where it's like, oh, I feel the feeling of sadness. And it's stemming from that first original one, but my body is no longer in a state of fight or flight, or my nervous system isn't reacting the way it used to. It's just my awareness is brought to it. I'm feeling the emotion and then it's gone.
Yeah, that's cool. That makes sense. You're just like peeling back the layers.
Hmm.
So, what sort of physical manifestations have you been able to help someone relieve? Like arthritis, shoulder pain? Like, what kinds of things have you witnessed?
Yeah. Let's see. I use the example of shoulder pain because that's the one that came to my mind first. And with a client, I had her moving through, and it was really the feeling of taking on too much, of being like relied upon a lot. And so, for instance, that one came from there. So, like, she felt literally like the whole world was on her shoulders. Like she had to do it alone, that she was alone, and that she had to create the space herself. And as we continued to move into that and recognize that the emotion was there, and it was like the feeling of like, I have to do it by myself, or like, I'm the only one that's going to be able to do this, it started to dissipate. And it didn't completely relieve the shoulder pain because when she is back in the awareness or the emotion of like, oh, I got to do this on my own, guess what flares up? That
Yeah,
shoulder pain. And so it's not to say that it's going to completely be gone forever, but then she's able to recognize, like, oh, I know exactly where this is coming from, and then move into that emotion, and then like instantly it's already feeling better, it's already feeling relieved. And there is something to say about like that, um like almost like the residue of what was there can still stay there, and it may be something that's like you're constantly working upon. But I have seen people move through an emotion or a pain in their body and then it just never resurfaces.
yeah, it's cool. It's really cool. I just feel like asking a question from the perspective of someone who's listening.
Maybe like what is the point of moving these emotions?
Yeah.
Like why would you want to? Besides the physical?
Yeah. Okay. Well, I should just leave this in because I can't take credit for that question.
No.
Shelby, what's the point?
That's so funny. Um, okay, well, I'll start off by saying like nobody wants to intentionally go into emotions, right? Nobody want
I
like
know there.
it's not
Yes,
something you sign up for like that you're excited about like, "Oh yeah, let's go feel this feeling." Like nobody
I
wants to
know.
do
Like
that.
nobody wants to go be sad on purpose.
Right. And I totally understand that. And yet it's like that like meditation thing where it's like someone says that they want to meditate and then it like for no reason at all they don't go meditate and they know how good they feel after, right? It's like the same thing with emotional alchemy. But what I really love is that as you continue to practice it and you continue to recognize these emotions coming forward, your life just gets so much easier and so much better because you're not holding on to things that literally don't matter, that are just triggering your nervous system. And so, one of the biggest reasons why I like to share that someone would do emotional alchemy or would want to do emotional alchemy is because one, it changes your life in a way that, say, you're at lunch with your friends and one of your friends says something that like pisses you off, and you're just like, I can't believe she would say that, or whatever, and instead of like ruminating on that thought throughout the rest of the day or the rest of the week for some people, you can just like excuse yourself and go into the bathroom and be like, okay, why am I so triggered by this? And where is it in my body? And release that and take a few moments to do that. And then come back into the space and have the awareness as to what it is that's creating the issue within you and then how to respond to that in a way that's coming from the heart, that's actually coming from the intuition. And so I like to explain like your inner voice, your higher self, your intuition is something that's always there. And if we look at it like it's a table and there's a map on it, right? And you want to know, how do I get to the next step in my life? Where do I go next? Like all of the questions that we have for other people and we ask them to answer when we have different types of sessions, they're already there. And our intuition and our guides and our higher self already has the map laid out for us. And when we have this density, we have this lower frequency, it starts to cover up the map. Like, let's say, like little rocks that are just covering the map all over the place. And as you continue to find the rocks or the emotional beanbags that come forward, you start to take them off, you start to dissolve them. And then the map becomes that much clearer. Then your connection and your access to your intuition, to your guides, to your higher self is that much more easily and readily available to tap into. Because it's not that we can't, or anyone can't tap into clairvoyance, can't tap into claircognizance, can't tap into the awareness of what their guides or their higher self or God is telling them to do or telling them is their next step. It's that we have all of these things blocking it. And
Hmm.
so if we're able to take these emotions and transmute them and alchemize them, then they turn into that knowing, that awareness, that love, that deep trust in, like, okay, I do know where I'm going. And as I continue to raise my frequency by intentionally finding where the density is and alchemizing it, all of my clairs start to turn online. All of my knowing, all of my abilities, and all of my trust in what is meant for me is going to be for me because then I can tap into my intuition. And when I ask a question, I don't have something blocking it. It's just giving me the answer.
That's cool. All right, so emotional alchemy. If you're here to get psychic, you know where to go.
Yeah.
You know what to do now. Okay, a couple things came up when you were breaking that down for us. So, I had this experience yesterday And I think that it's safe to say that a lot of us don't give credit to things that happen in our current or recent life that could cause trapped emotions.
Hmm.
I feel like a lot of people, myself included, might be inclined to be like, oh, only my traumatic childhood, only adolescence, only this when I was like quote unquote forming, but we're sort of
Hmm.
always being formed. And I had this realization yesterday. I'm home with my kids and they were off of school. It was a Monday. It was negative degrees in Chicago, so we weren't going outside. And they were just like in 2020, still just like screaming at each other. Like, I have two little boys, and they don't communicate in quiet tones. And I was like,
Hmm.
ah, like, oh
Hmm.
my God. Like, my husband had to go to a meeting and came back. And of course, I'm, as usual, doing a million things at once. And so, and then in the backdrop, just like during the pandemic, I was like taking this crazy business class and I had these two little kids freaking the hell out. So I realized like, oh my God, I have a level of reaction to just being in a situation that resembles 2020,
Hmm.
and I have a very strong reaction, and I don't think that I'm alone. I think a lot of parents get really um reactive when those
Right.
moments occur. So what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah. So, like you said, we're always forming, we're always changing and growing. And I would say that that probably stemmed from when you were young, from when something happened when you were young. But that doesn't mean that it stopped when you were young. It just continues to move on and move through. And so there's a couple things that stood out to me was that it's beautiful that it's beautiful and yet very emotionally dysregulating to hear your kids screaming at each other, right? But that also means that they're showing and they're expressing in the way that they feel comfortable doing it. Now, it's not to say that there's not a way to explain to them how to communicate together without the screaming, but if you, mom, are in a state of emotional irregulation and you're having a triggered response to this situation that's happening, you don't know how to explain it to them because you're in your own space, right? You're like in a dysregulated space. So it's like you're in panic mode.
Yeah, my husband came home and I was like, he was like, I was gone for 3 hours. And I was like repeatedly saying, I'm going to lose my mind. And
Yeah.
I was not kidding.
Yeah. And that's the thing. It's like when you're in that state, there's no way for your intuition or your higher guidance to guide you into telling them what's, or even to guide them into expressing their emotions without the way that they're responding, right? And so there's an emotion there that's being triggered by the fact that there is screaming in your household. And so, yes, that may stem back to someone screaming or something happening when you were really young, and that's where it started. But then in 2020, it exacerbated it because it was like now it's just in your face. And it's interesting because there was so many people that had situations like that that they were forced to deal with whatever it was that they weren't dealing with or that they didn't express at that time. And so that's why so many people woke up during 2020. It's because they were literally like locked in the houses with the people that were creating the things, right?
Explain what you mean by woke up. Are you referencing, like, for our audience, like a spiritual awakening?
Yeah. So, I mean, I don't feel like it's one thing, but that like they open their eyes, they peek through the veil of like, okay, there's something more here going on that is calling for me to engage with. And so not necessarily like now all of a sudden they're awake, they're awake, woke, and they're,
They've got crystal singing bowls.
exactly. But I mean, a lot of us had those things happen and they were thrown at us and we were forced to deal with it during that time because of, fear of being sick, because of like things where you're being trapped in the house with family members that have their own stuff going on and needing to respond. And so it's a blessing and a curse because you have to deal with it, right? And I want to circle it back to like, yes, it may have started when when you were young or somewhere else, but that it's continued to change and transform now. And so you're kind of having like a little PTSD to what happened then, but your body is responding in the way as if it was that time, right? And so if we can move into where did you feel the emotion when your kids were screaming, and how big is it and what does it feel like, and what would you say the emotion was? Like you were out of control or
I think just like overwhelm. I'm gonna get
yeah,
I just this just came to me. It was like this sense that my energy was just like
yeah,
splayed open, and I was just nothing, kind
mm-hmm,
just like, because I know that I regenerate and feel whole alone.
yeah,
And when I'm trapped in a small house that I can't go outside of
right,
for reasons of like the freezing weather that we're having or the pandemic that we had then,
mm-hmm,
I feel just like dissipated.
yeah,
That's the
yeah,
feeling, and I'm like, I have like nothing solid to hold on to.
mm-hmm, yeah. So the feeling of overwhelm and the feeling of feeling trapped and the feeling of there's nothing I can do to change this, right?
Yeah.
And so that may have stemmed from when you were younger and there was just too many things on your plate, or it may not have. But it does, at this point, it's like the question you asked earlier of like, do you need to know the origin? No,
Hmm.
because you know what it feels like today, you know what it feels like right now. And it could have been something that happened in, yesterday or the day before or even a week ago. But if you can remember the way it feels and you can bring that awareness back up in your body and your body is like, oh yeah, I remember how that feels, then you can still move through it. So you don't have to catch it right then and right there. And for instance, that at that point when that was happening, you didn't have the capacity and the space to feel it, right?
Hmm.
But you do today.
Yeah.
And so,
Yeah, because no one's here.
right. And so it's like, do I really want to go back into that or not? But if I do give myself the permission to go back into that for a few moments, then in a couple hours when my kids are back and they're screaming because of whatever, then I won't get dysregulated. My emotional body won't get like triggered by a situation. So it's like you want to pick like pick when you want to feel the suffering. Do you want to feel, and it's not necessarily suffering, but
Yeah.
like feel the emotion. Do I want to feel the emotion right now while I'm here alone and have the space and the capacity to feel it? Or do I want to get back into a state like that when my kids get home or whenever
Yeah.
anything happens that re-triggers it, right?
Right.
And
Totally.
so without going too far into the emotion, unless you want to, where would you say that that emotion came up in your body?
I mean, we can do it. I feel like it would be
Yeah,
educational.
I would love to.
Great. I've been being a test subject. I think it's productive for people.
Yeah, I love it because this concept is a little bit hard to describe and to grasp unless you can actually go into it. One of my teachers told me that it's like teaching someone how surf a wave on a surfboard by just telling them what to do. It's like you
Yeah.
can't really teach them how to surf without them actually getting on the board and surfing. And so
Yeah.
I love, if you're willing, I would love to move through it with you.
Let's go surfing.
Okay. So let's start out by dropping into the body. So go ahead and close your eyes and take a nice deep breath in through the nose. Hold it up at the top. Now exhale through the mouth. We're going to do that again. Inhale through the nose. Hold it. Hold it. Drop out through the mouth. And as you do, drop your awareness into your heart space, into that feeling of love, feeling of trust, feeling of where you've heard your inner voice, your intuition, your guidance before. And now expanding your awareness from the center of the heart outward, and even bringing forward the memory of yesterday and the screaming of the boys and being trapped in the house. And I'm kind of playing the role of your mind by like bringing it all up again. Where do you feel that in your body?
I actually feel it in my heart and like
Okay.
upper solar plexus, which is the
Yeah.
chakra right below the heart, audience.
Hmm. And now going deeper into that feeling of overwhelm, feeling of being out of control of your situation, about how big would you say it is?
It is a little bit smaller than like kind of like the width of my chest.
Okay.
It's like heart center and then like out to here.
Okay.
And
And
it
if you could
also
give it like a shape or a size, like you can use like a ball, football, a apple, like we want to give it a physical object so that we can focus on that.
so it's the size of a frisbee, but
Okay.
it is like has it's textural. So it
Yeah.
is like energetically like uh s- spongy.
Yeah.
It's not like a wet sponge, it's just like
Mhm.
staticky. That's the feeling of
Yeah.
the emotion. So it's
Okay.
not like a solid object, it's like a staticky mass.
Yeah. Okay. And any descriptive words helps. And just to give it a space, to give your mind something to gauge, right? So now go into that space I'm going to say the spongy frisbee full of, what word would you say? Overwhelm, out of
Yeah.
feeling out of control, overwhelm. Okay.
Yeah.
So go into and put your awareness, laser focus your awareness on that spongy frisbee full of overwhelm, sitting right between your heart and your solar plexus. And now use your breath to breathe into that space and just almost like you're welcoming on the feeling of overwhelm. So like come on, it's okay. Like go into it and
Ugh,
don't hold back. Yeah, it's
it
okay. It's
like
okay.
gives me chills.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And your body wants to like kind of like pull away, but don't pull away. Go into it even further. And your body knows what to do. Keep using your breath. If you need to tap on that space, you can tap on that space. Shake your arms, your legs, anything that feels comfortable for your body to move that emotion. And your breath is going to be your biggest ally in this, but it can come as the form of tears, it can come as shaking of the jaw or quaking, and just keep your awareness there and go deeper and deeper into it. It's not going to take over. It's not going to be overwhelming. Just go into that feeling of overwhelm to allow it to move through. Good job. So you're yawning right now. I know they
Yeah.
can't see you. She's yawning. Yawning is a great way of moving energy. So keep going.
Yeah, I felt it. I
Good
feel it like
job.
building up in my jaw
Uh-huh.
and my eyes and my mouth are watering.
Yeah, yeah. So water is a beautiful way to move energy also. So that comes out of tears. It comes out of, I've had someone actually physically throw up. That's not very often that that happens, but
Great.
sometimes the body moves energy however it needs to move it. So just keep going deeper into that spot. Allow the feeling of overwhelm to come forward. Good job. You're doing
Oh my
great.
god.
Keep going.
It's
It's
like
okay.
the biggest yawns of my life. I can't stop.
Good. Keep going. Go deeper into it. Go deeper into it. It's
So
okay.
weird.
Good job. You're doing great. Continue with your breathing.
Okay, I stopped breathing for a minute there.
Yeah, it's okay. A lot of people do. It's all right. Good job. Keep going deeper into it and keep bringing forward that feeling of overwhelm, that feeling of children screaming, that feeling of you're trapped in a house. I'm playing the role of the mind by allowing those thoughts to come forward that in return helps to bring forward that emotion. Good job. Now I'm going to have you check back in and let me know, has it changed? Is it the same or different in the chest and the solar plexus? Good
Oh
job.
my god, when I stop yawning, I will tell
That's
you.
okay. Yeah,
God.
you're good. Allow it to move through. Your body knows how to move it.
Okay, so you guys, I'm yawning like I can't close my mouth and my eyes are okay, I gotta yawn some more.
Keep
This
going.
is
You're
this is riveting radio.
I like to kind of like continue to talk to the person as they're moving through the emotion to give mind something to concentrate on also while they're moving the emotion and so that they don't have that insecurity of like I'm feeling an emotion right now. So
Yeah.
kind of give like a little veil of like protection of continuing to talk to them and talk them through it. Okay, so let's check back in to that spongy frisbee full of overwhelm right in between the heart and the solar plexus. Is it the same or different shape?
It's like way smaller and it moved right to my sternum.
Okay. Yeah. So what we're going to do is we're going to release today what is safe and ready to be released, which is what your awareness is showing you. Good job.
Oh my god, I
She's
cannot.
yawning, yawning, yawning. It's okay. Your body is moving the emotion the way it needs to. And so by doing it this way, it might be the most comfortable way for you to move emotion.
Yes.
Sometimes, crying on a live on a podcast isn't the most comfortable way of moving emotion, so your
I
body's
like
going to
to,
pick
yeah,
other things.
right. I like to do that on every other episode,
Yeah.
so not today. Just kidding.
Okay. Okay, so let's put our awareness back in that space on the sternum. And about how big would you say it is now? Like a small sponge now instead of a frisbee, or what size?
Let's see. I gotta find it.
Okay, now, so drop your awareness back in. Good job. The thing is
Yes,
it, yeah, yeah. Okay, so like the size of, I don't know.
a tangerine.
Okay, yeah, yeah. People pick fruit and footballs, fruits and balls all the time. And that's the thing
Uh,
is that it could start most of the time. So I'm gonna actually have you place your awareness in that tangerine in the sternum area and go back into that feeling of overwhelm. So bring it up. It's like my teacher says, go for gold. So if we can get out as much as we can today, let's do that because your awareness is going to bring forward what is safe and ready for you to release right now so that you
yeah.
do not have to experience that in that intensity again. So go in and allow it to be there and bring forward the feeling of overwhelm. And you can even like invite it in if it feels good for you. You can even like open your arms almost like you're gonna hug it and like like invite the feeling into your body. And keep your awareness there in the sternum of the tangerine filled with overwhelm. And so bring forward that feeling of overwhelm. And as you continue, I'm going to keep talking while you're breathing into it. Don't forget to use your breath. You can use your fingers to tap into it, move your body. Good job. She's yawning again. And so I'm going to talk while you're breathing into that space and keep your awareness there. And a lot of times when we start, it starts out like a fruit, like a football, like a big, heavy, dense thing. But as you start to focus your awareness and hone your awareness even deeper onto these emotions, they start becoming kind of weird objects, or even like veins of like granite, or just like a light veil of a cloth that's sitting on top of your body, that it's a little bit harder to differentiate where it is in the body because it's not super obvious. But that's your awareness growing. And so it's becoming stronger and allowing you to find the ones that aren't even that big, that aren't even that dense. And so
Hmm.
as you continue to move into that tangerine in the sternum, full of overwhelm, how does it feel now? The same or different?
It's different.
Yeah.
It's like way smaller and kind of just like it's diffused a lot. And
Yeah.
also I feel like I do feel like a tiny of it like came to live in my
In your
um
throat?
throat, but it's all
Yeah.
like really subtle.
Yeah. So as you move into an emotion and it's really big and you start to feel that and process that and alchemize it, sometimes it does move. And like, let's say, for instance, like for you right now, you're saying that it moved into your throat a little bit. That might be the fact that you felt like you couldn't say anything. There was nothing you could do about it. There wasn't like a way for you to express the way you needed to express. So it is really, um, it feels like that's something that, it starts to show you where else you're feeling a little bit more emotion that can be released.
Yeah. Okay, this is amazing. I have to say, okay, here's a couple things I have to tell you guys. You have to do this. It wasn't sad or scary, but I also keep really feeling strongly that I need to say that you don't have to be clairvoyant or even consider yourself to be super intuitive to know exactly what shape is taking.
Hmm.
It's
Yeah.
not like I have the strong sense that you will just know. Do you find that when
Hmm.
you work with people who are not like, you know, psychic,
Yeah.
that they know?
Yeah, so because some people don't see as quickly or as easily a shape or a size, um, it's just like feeling into it. It's like saying like I don't see the banana there, but I can feel what it feels like.
Yeah.
Like you can get a knowing of something, and really the shape and size is just to give your mind something to do and a way to gauge that you're actually doing something. Because at first, it started out as this big frisbee and then it got smaller. And so the way that it encourages you to continue to move into it, to continue to process it, is that you're giving your mind a way of saying like, hey, something is changing, something is like getting, it is getting smaller. And
Yeah.
so it's not necessary that you have to find a shape and you have to find a size, but I do feel that it helps quite a bit. But I did speak with my husband recently when he was saying that he was having a little bit more of a challenging time finding one of his emotions shape and size. He just kept repeating over and over the thing that was like going on in his head. So, for instance, he had something that was repeating, looping over and over and over in his head. And like, I'm going to use an example for me. Like, I always would have the like awareness come forward, like, oh, did I do that wrong? Did I get it wrong? Did I do that wrong? And so it's kind of hard for me to find the shape and the size of did I get that wrong? Because it's really
Yeah.
more of a looping thought pattern that just keeps ruminating in my head. It
Oh,
doesn't
yeah.
really feel like, did I get it wrong feels like a baseball on the side of my head. No, not really. Like I didn't have, so what he told me that he did, which actually really helped me in a way because he wasn't able to get the shape and the size, was that he went through and he was like repeating over and over and finding the awareness of where the thought pattern was in his head. And for me, it was, did I get that wrong? Did I get that wrong? Did I get that wrong? And so repeating the thought pattern over and over and over and moving into the feeling of, did I get that wrong? Did the same thing. It still transmuted the thing that was looping. It was, and it
Yeah.
didn't need the shape or size. But some of these bigger ones, they need them. And some of them, a thought pattern, for instance, is in my head. And I could probably say it felt like like a little tiny rope that was on the side of my head, but that's kind of hard to find it, right?
Yeah.
So it's not like that you need the shape and size,
Yeah.
but it helps tremendously if your mind can have something to grab onto to show you that it's actually moving out of your body.
Yeah.
And so, real quick, let's just check back in with that tangerine one more time and see if there's anything left that can be transmuted. So, take a nice deep inhale through your nose, exhale
I've
through the
never
mouth. Oh,
I've never yawned more in my life.
that's okay. Your body is going to move that. And
It's
it,
so funny. I mean, I'm well aware that like yawning is an indicator of energy moving, but I've genuinely never had it like
yeah,
that.
isn't it crazy? Like your body knows what to do. You don't even really have to
So weird.
force it. It's just going to do it as long as you allow it. So check back in with that grape tangerine in the sternum full of overwhelm. And how does it feel now?
I'm not even sensing it.
Yeah. And so when you think about your kids screaming and you're trapped in the house and you don't know what to do and you got so many things that need to happen that you've got to do and you've got a million things on the to-do list, how does it feel?
It's like almost like it doesn't take form. I
Mm-hmm.
could feel it. It was kind of like
Mm-hmm.
a cloudiness.
Yeah. I like to call it like kind of like an echo of the feeling that was there.
Yes.
Yeah.
It,
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay. So if you can find that little tiny, tiny, tiny echo that's left there, and just put a couple deep breaths straight into that, almost like you're blowing into a balloon and blow it straight into that space. Good job. You're doing so good. Let's get it all. Why leave a little bit left over at the end? Good job. Now, how does it feel?
Good.
Now, bring your awareness back to that heart. Love, peace, and expand the awareness outward. Okay.
Cool.
So that's not to say you'll never feel the feeling of overwhelm again, because
Yeah.
of course, we live in a crazy world. That's
Yeah.
fun. But next time you feel it, you get to go, oh, I know how to move into this.
Yeah, and also like that particular sense of overwhelm was distinctly related to it felt like distinctly related to something else.
Hmm.
So, I
Yeah.
feel like I feel like we probably made a dent in that reactive sort of emotion.
Yeah.
Um cool. Now everyone can release their parenting PTSD.
Yeah.
Oh my god. That was awesome. Thank you. I'm like,
My
what am I
pleasure.
how can I talk now? I just have to like keep yawning.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I mean, we have filled an hour with emotional alchemy. You're going to have to come back again where we can talk about all of the other things that you do.
Yeah. I'd love
So
to.
you do, let's touch really quick on you do inner voice facilitation
Hmm.
and quantum hypnosis. And then you
Yeah.
combine all three of the things, right?
Yeah. So I'm really glad that the majority of the episode was focused on the emotional alchemy because the emotional alchemy is actually what's going to create a change in your life right now, you
Yep.
know? And
Yeah.
in doing the emotional alchemy, it creates the awareness to be able to talk to the inner voice. So the inner voice facilitation is where I play the role of the mind and I help someone tap into that inner voice within themselves and I ask the questions that their mind may have about it and then they get the answers from within their own awareness. So instead of me giving advice to someone on what I think they should do, I keep them in that inner voice, in that awareness of their higher self, and they answer their own questions. And so it's a recorded 2 hour long interview, basically, where I'm interviewing your inner voice with all the questions about your health, about your relationships, about your abundance, about your any question about what's going on in the world, and I allow you to answer from your intuition and to guide yourself. And so for me, my something that's very important to me is creating sovereignty and creating that within someone. So I teach them how to tap into their own inner guidance. And we use the emotional alchemy to take away any blocks that are keeping them from tapping into that emotional guidance. And then after the session, they already know how to tap in. So they don't actually have to ever come back to me if they don't want to, which is ideal. If they can continue to tap into that intuition and transmute these emotions by alchemizing them on their own, that's what I want to do. And if they want space or they need space being held, then they can come back, but it's not necessarily what I'm looking for. Like, I want to teach you how to fish for yourself and then
Yep.
say, go fish, you know?
Hmm.
And even with the quantum healing, which is what I got certified in inner voice facilitation, and then I got certified, and in the inner voice facilitation, I learned the emotional alchemy. And then I got certified in the quantum healing, or like past life regression, or QHT. It was, I love being able to help people tap into their intuition right now about their life. And then I was like, oh, well, I kind of want to know more about like past lives or parallel lives and things like that. So then I learned how to do that. But I was like, there's got to be a way of combining these beautiful modalities. And that's how trigonic healing was born, is by combining the inner voice facilitation with the emotional alchemy and the past life slash parallel life regression. So in these sessions, we go into other lifetimes or past lives or parallel lives, or um, sometimes it's even going into a realm that isn't here but isn't necessarily a life, and exploring and seeing what your soul's been through, or what's next, or whichever way your guidance wants to send you. But in doing the emotional alchemy within those lives, so say for instance we go to a past life where there was um a tragedy and a loss of family, and it's creating this blockage in this lifetime because you can't allow people in because you're afraid that you're going to lose them, or whatever density that's being held from that lifetime. I was like, well, why can't we go back into that life and not just look at what it was, but also do emotional alchemy for that part of your soul and alchemize that part? So then in return, in this lifetime, you're able to open your heart up to people and not feel the loss that happened in that lifetime. So it all kind of comes back to the emotional alchemy and releasing the density throughout whatever lifetime you're living. And so I love that it was mostly about the emotional alchemy, because that's what's actually going to create a big change for you, because you're literally intentionally raising your frequency by finding the density, transmuting it, and then boop, 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 you go up.
Hmm. Yeah, that's beautiful. Yeah, it's crazy. It's like no matter what I'm learning about in this exploration, it's repeatedly arising that emotions are part of the fabric of who we are, and they are the energy that surrounds us and creates us and that we put into the world, and
Yeah.
not something to be put away.
Hmm. Yeah.
So thank you so much for walking me through that while being recorded.
Yeah.
That was really cool, and I will totally report back about next time I get locked in my house in the dead of winter with my family.
Yeah.
Uh,
And the other thing is like, if you're not in this triggered state, then if something like that happens, then you're going to be able to stay calm enough to go, oh, hey, son, this is what you're needing, because there's a reason why there's that it wasn't only the children, but that's part of it, like,
Yeah.
and so you'll be able to like have that clear guidance from your higher self on like, well, this is what I should say to him, and show him like, oh, this is how you can feel your emotion. Like, if we can teach our kids how to do this instead of teaching them to like be quiet and stop, like, then it'll never get trapped within them. And so that's why
Yeah.
I know it's like, even though you don't want to hear your kids screaming, like I love to hear that like
Yeah. I caught that.
they felt comfortable enough to do that.
I know.
You haven't.
I haven't crushed their souls enough yet, so that's great. Oh my gosh. Well, thank you so much, Shelby. This has been really enlightening, and I can't wait for people to hear it.
Yeah, thank you, Suki. It was an honor to be able to hold space for you. And if anyone, is listening to this and it even helps them to move through it while you are in the episode, like, do it. If that's what allows you to move the emotion, it doesn't matter if I'm doing it with you. It just matters that you're getting through this emotion by feeling it and not running away from it.
Yeah. Although it does feel really good to
Yeah.
have you holding the space. Like
Yeah.
it was super helpful. So thank
Yeah,
you.
of course. You're very welcome.
Thanks so much for listening. We hope you enjoyed today's conversation as much as we did. Be sure to subscribe and follow us wherever you get your podcasts so that you never miss a new episode. If you liked today's episode, please consider leaving a review to help the other psychics find their way here.